सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen though.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
It's an unusual episode of CutTheClutter because it will contain quite a bit of opinion. In fact, occasionally we do put some bit of opinion in CutTheClutter, but in this one there will be quite a lot of it. The rest of it is essentially explanation, which is another name for decluttering. So we are explaining some very complex issues, mainly arising from this hijab, education, right to schooling, right to college issue that's now blowing up in Karnataka. So we'll talk about that in detail. But before I go there, let me remind you that this is the time you have to renew your subscriptions and send fresh subscriptions. An organization like ThePrint does not run on thin air, on cool air. In any case, Delhi's air is never that wonderful. It needs money from good people like you. So please open your wallets and take subscriptions. You can take annual subscriptions, quarterly, half yearly. We know that RBI gives us trouble over monthly subscriptions. So what can I do except apologize to you on RBI's behalf? But it doesn't stop you from taking out paid subscriptions, because that is the only thing that can keep journalism like ours going. So thank you very much. My pitch over. I'll come back to the point. Now, the issue in Karnataka. Today's CutTheClutter emerges from a short editorial we write. We have something called a 50-word edit. 50-word why? The idea came up once when I was, as usual, working late into the night, and I figured that Twitter now allowed you 280 characters. They had doubled the limit. Earlier it was 140 characters. I just did some mazaka vaste, a little bit of calculation, and I figured that 280 characters is about 50 words. So I said, if you can make a point in a full tweet of 280 characters, you can also make an editorial point in 50 words. Because what is an editorial? An editorial is an opinion. You make your point. There is no on the one hand, not on the other hand, not what about this, what about that. For this, all of us Gyanis are available to write articles for you. I don't think anybody reads those 600 word, 800 words, erudite editorials in great newspapers. I do, but that's also my job. I do. In fact, if you read the Indian Express editorial today, it's wonderful. It makes me feel proud of the fact that I was there for 25 years in two spells. That's the editorial Express has written today on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's speech. So please check that out. I will share a link also with you. But most of you don't read editorials. So this is the essence of the editorial, because there has to be an institutional view. The reason media editorials are unsigned is because they give you the institutional view. They do not give any individual's view. Occasionally, you will find that traditional newspapers also carry a front page signed editorial by the editor. Increasingly, that tradition is now dying out. So we wrote this 50-word edit, which you can see on my screen, and I'll let it sit on the screen for a little while so you can read it carefully and screenshot it if you so wish. Now that led to some kind of a fire. We had expected that there will be a backlash. We had expected that 50 words are too little to make a nuanced, complex point. But we also know that nobody reads 500 words if you try and make a point and the point is lost. So we made a sharp point. The second principle we follow is, and that's a principle I've tried to follow in my life, and I can promise you it's not always easy, that is, never do the wrong thing for the right reason. So just because something is politically correct or something will draw you a lot of applause or praise from one side or any side, that's a good reason, right? Who doesn't want praise? Who doesn't want retweets? Who doesn't want adulation? Who doesn't like likes? But the fact is, then you're doing the wrong thing for the right reason. If because of that you don't speak what you think is the truth, then you're doing wrong thing for the right reasons, or wrong thing for good reasons. That we don't do. So in this case, this is a point that had to be made. And the point was that please try to separate the two issues. One, denial of right to education. There is an RTE Act, right? This in Karnataka, we have seen a widespread violation of RTE, right to education. No doubt about it. And Karnataka government is guilty. It is for them to ensure that that RTE, all the privileges, all the rights that every student, whatever the faith has, her rights to education are not affected. That's one. Second, definitely the constitution as it exists with Article 25, even 19 if you read with that, it's been violated because some people are being denied entry into schools. Actually, what is called as college in Karnataka is a little bit complicated. My colleague YP Rajesh, who's a Kannadiga, he explains to me that in Karnataka, there is also this system of junior college. So students who do class 11, 12, they go to something that is junior college, like what used to be a higher secondary school earlier, or what is +2. So these are essentially school students in the age group of 15, 16, maybe the odd one 17, but in that age group. So what I'm trying to do is, it's a complex thing. I'm trying to explain to you the binary. There are two issues here. One is the right of women to be educated, to go to school and college, that must not be denied to them because they are wearing the hijab. On that, we stand four square behind that right cannot be violated. These women cannot be denied education because they wear the hijab or whatever they choose to wear. What you choose to wear is a matter of choice. The other side of the binary is compulsion to wear a hijab. Can you fight for the right of women, irrespective of their faith and their dress, to attend school and college, to be not denied education, at the same time not support the idea of hijab wearing, and to say that this is part of culture, it's a religious requirement, it's a compulsion? So we have to decide what the debate is. Is the debate about fundamental rights, the constitution, my not being denied education because of my faith and what I want to wear for my faith? Or is the debate whether it's an Islamic compulsion or a choice to wear a hijab? Now, the second part I will again cut into two, which is that, is wearing a hijab or a burqa or a pagdi or a saffron scarf, is that my choice, or is that something that my religion compels me to do? That is the nuance that we have to think about. And I know a lot of people say, a lot of good people say, we are fighting this big Hindutva wave. This is not the time to nuance. But you cannot fight anything you disagree with without nuance. It's very easy to write a tweet saying so-and-so is Hitler, right? So-and-so is fascist. But आपकी भड़ास तो निकल गई, मेरी भड़ास भी निकल सकती है, लेकिन what have you achieved? Or similarly, you can say so-and-so is an angel, right? So-and-so is a savior. Those are things that determine your voting preferences. Those are not things that settle debates either way. And those are not also things that inform people to make their opinion on a debate in a sensible, cool and calm way. That's why we have to say, once again, I'm repeating, and its repetition is important, that no woman should be denied access to school, college, jobs, anything, any opportunity, but definitely, most certainly, education, because she is wearing a hijab. But I will not defend hijab, the wearing of hijab, as a nice idea or as an idea necessary for somebody's dignity. I would then say, why are all these arguments? I will not turn the argument of the feminists back on them, and I would say, why are all these arguments about dignity, about haya as it's called, or about modesty, why are they all confined to how women dress or conduct themselves? Never about men. So in fact, if I say that no, to say that it is necessary, that faith makes it necessary or compulsory for a woman to wear a hijab or parda or whatever, I would not only say it's regressive, I would also say that I will not defend the hijab as a religious symbol. And if you look at the arguments in Karnataka High Court, I'm aghast looking at the arguments. And I don't have a reporter there, so I'm checking from bar and bench, and you will see some tweets from bar and bench running on the screen as I talk. See what the petitioner's lawyer is saying. He's Mr. Devdutt Kamat. He even goes on to say that, look, my son wears his namam, which is my caste mark, and goes to school. Nobody stops him. So why can't people wear hijab? All right, so far so good. But then he also goes on to quote from the Quran, and in fact I noted the verse he quoted from, 24.31, where he says that the Quran says, the Holy Quran says that no woman will expose her neckline to anybody except her husband. Now, I mean, how many women pass that test? How many Muslim women pass that test? And I'm not saying they must pass that test. That is choice, whether they want to cover their neckline or not cover their neckline. But to now say for this lawyer in the court that the Quran compels them to do so, that means anybody not covering her neckline fully up to the chin or more is being un-Islamic. Then he goes on to quote from the Hadith, and he says, Hadith says that from the moment a woman begins to menstruate, that woman cannot expose any part of her body except her hands and face to other men. Now this is precisely something that Saudi Arabia used to have, and they are lifting it now. They are allowing women to come out and hold yoga classes in tights in their parks. Now you have this lawyer in a High Court of India saying that this is a religious requirement and the court must stand for it. And the court must stand for it. Why? Because this is my faith's personal law. If that is your faith's personal law, then you come into the constitution. Now the similar arguments were made when the triple talaq issue came up, and what happens right now is we are so polarized. That polarization instinctively gets a lot of very good people also to see everything in terms of pro-BJP, anti-BJP. What's good for Modi, what's not good for Modi. And that's where you lose nuance, and that's where you need nuance. Now, triple talaq, look at the arguments that were given for triple talaq. One, that's a tradition. It's a personal law. You can't mess with it. I will take you right back to 1985. And I will share a story that I did, a cover story for India Today magazine at that point, and that was about the Shah Bano case. Now, I will give you a 2-minute exposition of the Shah Bano case. There was this old woman who'd been divorced by her husband in the traditional Islamic way. She was just given a little bit of money, which was her meher. Meher is something, nikah is a contract. Nikah says this is your meher, which means if the husband tells you to go home, then you'll be given this much. That meher was quite little. Even if it was large, it wouldn't have mattered, because this old woman, and look at her pictures, she wasn't a privileged woman. This old woman went to court and said that, look, I'm a citizen of India. I have my rights as a woman. Now this case went right up to the Supreme Court of India. And the Supreme Court of India, very good bench, ruled in her favor, saying that she is entitled to alimony. The other side claimed on the other hand that according to Muslim personal law, she is not entitled to anything beyond her meher. So the Supreme Court made what would be called a progressive order, right? But it triggered a lot of people on the other side, on the extreme secular side, on the Islamic side, and within Rajiv Gandhi's cabinet. And Rajiv Gandhi panicked. It's the biggest single error he made. He panicked. He went to Parliament. He carried out an amendment whereby Supreme Court's judgment was nullified. And that, first of all, that gave the BJP to rise and say, see, this is appeasement. This is something that the Supreme Court had said in terms of the Indian Constitution, equality for people of all faiths under Indian Constitution. Now Congress party has used their brute majority in Parliament to overturn this on the pretext of one particular faith's personal laws overriding the Constitution. Now what happened after that? After that, Rajiv Gandhi realized he started using some by-elections and things, and he also realized that he'd made a big mistake. So he had a bad conscience. Ultimately, it led to his unlocking the temple mosque site in Ayodhya, his allowing the Shilanyas. In fact, Shilanyas was pretty much consecrated under the watch of Bhuta Singh, who was a senior cabinet minister under him. After that, he launched his 1989 election campaign from Ayodhya and promised Ram Rajya in India. Why? Because he had figured by that one act of the use of brute majority to subvert the spirit of a reformist, forward-looking, brave Supreme Court order, and by privileging faith's personal law over the Constitution and over the Supreme Court judgment which was delivered according to the Constitution, because the priests of that faith and those who drew votes from that faith did not want it, that was hurting him. And that's what opened the gates. Hindutva Light then became Hindutva Supreme and ultimately led to two full majorities for Narendra Modi. For anything that happens in India, roots were planted, seed was planted much earlier. It takes some time for any major change in Indian politics to reach its logical conclusion. So the logical conclusion of that error that Rajiv Gandhi made, which everybody who was speaking for Indian Muslims, not everybody, some people, there were some honorable people, and I will mention one of them to you. They celebrated that as a brave thing to protect the Muslim personal law, to protect a minority. That has given us the most majoritarian rule with a full majority now in the country. That has also then created an environment whereby now this whole idea of separate personal laws for different religions is now being salami sliced. And we saw in Triple Talaq also how Congress party was also twisting in the wind. That has also emerged from a Supreme Court judgment, because as time passes, courts in modern societies, in democracies, in constitutional states now look at citizens' laws much more in the context of modernism. For this lawyer now, Mr. Kamath, to say that this was written in Hadith like this was written in the Quran like this, you are taking us back to 6th, 7th, 8th centuries AD, right? The context of the world was different. The context of the world was, there was a lot of politics, there was a lot of warfare, there was jostling for space and territory, there was jostling also for adherence. Christians and Muslims in the course of time began fighting, and you know what happens? If you defend fundamentalism on one side, it is the fuel that fundamentalism on the other side needs. So what you call as both-sidism is not both-sidism. It is to say what is not correct for one side is also not correct for the other side, and just because one is doing it, others should not do it. Would you call it both-sidism? So if there was no Christian conservatism in the medieval world and there was no Muslim conservatism, now you might say which one came first? I don't know that much history. But one conservatism fed into other, and that led to the Crusades, and that led to the rise of knight so and so, knight so and so, knight so and so. Sorry, my GK is poor on that. Knight Templar, knight this, knight that. And also on the rise of a heroic figure on the other side like Saladin. So crusading kings came, Saladin and others went from this side. People traveled thousands of miles from their homes to fight for what? To fight for their faith, to fight in the crusades. That is why it is important to fight conservatism on all sides. Religious conservatism, your religion is okay in your place of worship, in your home, with your family, but you cannot defend conservatism on one side hoping that the other side will not take the cue from it, because it most certainly will. In fact, even now you watch, even if the court rules in favor of the hijab, not as a compulsory practice, but says that school should not deny entry to the students, I will be very happy with that judgment. Even if that happens, the fact is that the BJP side would have won a very major battle. Already I see this tweet, please see this tweet from Pramod Vij. He's an MLA, BJP MLA in Panipat. There may be thousands of MLAs all over the country. Why do I particularly keep track of what Pramod Vij writes? Because we are old schoolmates. We are old schoolmates in class 9, 10 in Panipat, in Sanatan Dharma Higher Secondary School, Panipat. And his father then used to be the MLA. We are very close friends. And in fact, during exam days, we used to go and study in his home because it was more unlikely that power will go off in his home. Now he's an MLA and he's tweeted, see what? He's telling us what will be the consequence of what's happening in Karnataka right now, that this is now giving a cue to the BJP to move further towards a uniform civil code. And you know what? This will find wide national support, just as the triple talaq law did. So once again, this binary is between two religious fundamentalism. One is not better than the other, one is not less worse than the other. Both are equally bad. All religious fundamentalism is bad. Modern societies don't need it. And those societies that embrace it, they are paying for it like hell. Watch what keeps happening in Pakistan. Watch what's happening in Afghanistan. That's an extreme example. And watch also the way Saudi Arabia is opening out and changing, because they also figured that this was a liability. And if you see a lot of Hindu conservatism coming up in India, that also is a threat. But again, the way to fight that is not to say that the other conservatism is good, because that is the fuel for this. Second, let me make a proposition to you. It's also said that, look, Hindu women are not being stopped from attending school if they might be wearing a ghungat. But the fact is, if 15, 16-year-old Hindu women arrived at these schools and colleges in Karnataka, class 11 and 12, wearing full saris and bindi and bangles and God knows what else, what will we say? We'll get very worried and we'll say, look, their families are being so conservative and so unorthodox. And I bet families would also insist that they have their sleeves fully covered, that they have heads fully covered. Everybody is quite interested in covering their women. So what will we say? We will attack their families and this practice for conservatism. And even if they are being influenced by Hindu groups to do so, we will equally go to war with them. Why can't we similarly go to war with the other side? If Hindu religious radicalism and orthodoxy is bad, which it is, equally Islamic orthodoxy and conservatism is also bad. You can't say that, I will fight my good fight in stages. पहले मैं इससे लड़ता हूँ, फिर मैं उससे लड़ूंगा. This is not a test match that you play first innings first and second innings later. You have to play it all at the same time. You don't have the luxury of compartmentalizing, because if you do, then what you do with one will give fuel to the other, and that's exactly what's been happening. I mentioned to you the example of triple talaq. Now, where is this coming from? I'm just shaking in frustration when I watch this lawyer reading from the Quran and the Hadith. And this line is getting generally supported to the extent that abhi iski baat mat karo, this is not the time to nuance it. All right, you can ignore it now. And suppose he wins this battle, because ultimately all these arguments are in public domain and they will go in public domain. The same people who say look the other way because this is not the time for nuance, let him say all this, that Hadith says you can't, once you started menstruation. So will you now ask every young woman you meet, beta, have you started menstruating or not? अगर तुमने तो शुरू हो गया period, तुम्हारा तो अभी sleeveless पहना हुआ है, right? It cannot happen like this. It's too personal, right? You're exposing women to wolves of whatever faith. That is not right. And this can go on and on. So there are a few central points I want to make in conclusion. And I apologize if it's gone on a bit today. One, patriarchy and religious majoritarianism. I'm using different names for Islamic conservatism at this point and Hindutva, right? So patriarchy and religious majoritarianism both come from religion. Both need to be contested, right? Both need to be contested and both need to be contested simultaneously. If you call it both sidism, I would say fighting two evils at the same time is courage. It's not both sidism. You're not hiding from anything. Islamic side and religious majoritarianism from the Hindutva side. At the same time, we fight for the right of women, of Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Christian, from whatever faith to have full access to school and college. So, once again, in conclusion, once again, you can condemn the denial of school and college education or access to these women because they are wearing the hijab, while at the same time not glorifying or defending or sanctifying the idea of women having to wear the hijab. There is no contradiction there and there is no both sidism. Now, talking about conservatism in religions. Now, we have seen a lot of this. We've seen in Punjab, for example, a state which has such serious problems. One of the key issues is sacrilege. That state also passed a sacrilege law, a blasphemy law, which fortunately the President of India stopped and the courts also intervened. But that law says that for anything that is seen as blasphemy, you will get life imprisonment. Like similarly now, Hindu political conservatism, just as that was Sikh political conservatism. I'm deliberately stepping away from Islam for a moment. UP now, in its manifesto, the BJP says that there will be a new love jihad law where for so-called love jihad, what will we do? We will send the person to 10 years in jail. Now, what is the purpose of this? The purpose of this is only one, which is to deny Hindu women their own freedom of choice in terms of who they want to marry. So, every faith, every kind of conservatism basically targets the weakest, targets the most vulnerable, and it mostly targets the women. And you have to fight all of it at the same time. Because today, if you take your attention away or ignore this whole idea that faith compels Muslim women to wear the hijab and cover themselves, cover their bodies. If you do that, then at the same time, you question Yogi Adityanath and BJP with this completely outrageous love jihad law. People will say this is one-sidism of the worst kind. And those people are the ones who matter. Those are the people who, after Shah Bano case, turned away from the Congress party. And I'll tell you, I mentioned to you earlier that there were some honorable people who spoke against the idea of appeasing the Muslim clergy then. One of them was a very honorable young man who was a minister in Rajiv Gandhi's cabinet. That his name was Arif Muhammad Khan. And he kept on pleading and begging with Rajiv Gandhi, don't do it. I'm a young Muslim. I've been a Muslim student leader. Muslims will understand, right? Don't listen to the clergy. But he was ignored. What happened? He left the party. He built the opposition with VP Singh. They came to power. Today he's with the BJP in a way. He's the governor of Kerala. So what happens is when you play up to conservatism of any side, you also destroy the liberals of that side. And check out your political history. 1984, Congress came to power with 415 seats in Lok Sabha, 415. In 1989, they lost power. Since then, they've never won a majority. Today, they have 51, 52 MPs, in fact, which is an improvement over the low 40s that they had in last parliament. If you ask me why that's happened, I will say, ये शाह बानो केस का पाप बोल रहा है. This is, they are paying for their sin, the sin of what they did on the Shah Bano judgment.